Industry experts from Powerhouse Brands. Earned Summit, Building a Community by Tribe Dynamics.
Called Topo Designs. We're based here in Colorado. And we started about 10 years ago. My personal background, I was an art student in college, got a degree in sculpture, rapidly understood the lack of marketable skills that required to get a job after that. So I kind of moved pretty quickly into the graphic design world and branding, and did that for about 10 years and gained a lot of various skills across many different industries there, and kind of just felt like I needed to start my own thing after doing that for quite some time. So kind of leaned on my branding background and started sewing some pretty rough backpacks in my basement. Bought a sewing machine, didn't know what I was doing, and then ended up kind of starting Topo about a year after working on some prototypes. So yeah, just started in my basement, and now we're 10 years later and have a lifestyle outdoor brand called Topo Designs.
Great. Jamie, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everyone. Thanks, Chantal. I'm Jamie Starr. I am the Global Director of Sports Marketing for a little 50-year-old brand called The North Face, which used to be based in the Bay Area, but has recently moved to Denver, Colorado. Basically, what I do is handle all of the strategy around how we work with our athlete team and other sort of non-owned partnerships. So, of course, our athletes are in the mountain sports realm. So we're talking about the world's most elite alpinists, climbers, runners, and snow sports athletes, so skiers and snowboarders. My path here has been an interesting one. I grew up in a really tiny community in the middle of, I'll hesitate to say nowhere. It was kind of the middle of somewhere, Crested Butte, Colorado. I grew up at a time, proud Zennial here, when mountain biking had just started and snow sports were really changing rapidly. And so I had the luxury of growing up in a really tight-knit community at a dynamic time. So kind of the culture of what I do now is something I've always been privy to, but along the way, I actually became a lawyer, went to school in Boulder, Colorado, and was always more interested in brands than the zero-sum game of being a lawyer. And ultimately, over the last decade or so, after working with several other brands in the ski and outdoor space, I landed at the North Face. So happy to be here.
That's great. Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle from Beyond Yoga, and I am the CEO and co-founder. We started Beyond Yoga 15 plus years ago. My business partner Jody and I started this company out of the need for inclusive clothing for women of all shapes and sizes. And you know, our mission from day one has always been to make clothing that make people feel amazing the moment they put it on, and to inspire people to live their best lives and to feel really comfortable. So our mission has always been about inclusivity and you know, empowerment and just radical self-love. And you know, it's been a journey, and we're really proud of where we've brought the brand over the last 15 years.
How you've, or what the role that your brand's community plays in building it up and reaching new customers, and specifically how you work with influencers and other types of partners like athletes to get the message out and to keep that sort of feeding and growing. Maybe Michelle, you could actually go first and tell us a bit about what role you know, influencers or other types of people who can partner and represent your brand, what role has that played in the company's history?
Sure. You know, at Beyond Yoga, we're very focused on our community, and it's less about influencers and more about people who are passionate about what we're doing and our mission. I almost feel a little cliche saying that we're, this inclusive brand, because I think that's the message of almost all brands at this point, which is, actually really exciting to us, because when we started this business, nobody was, focused on the plus market. Nobody wanted to use real models in their campaign imagery. We got a lot of pushback for trying to sell full size runs. We've, always went from size extra, extra small to extra, extra large. And, people were very confused by why we did this. But it's, it's, always been core to who we are to make sure that we're making clothing that fits everybody and that everyone has the opportunity to, to be a part of it. And so that's very much how our influencer network and how our, social stands. We want to make sure that anybody who's passionate about, our mission is involved, and we're not overly concerned whether you're a celebrity or whether you're, a super athlete, because our message isn't, go out there. Even though we are a fitness clothing line, it's not about go out there and, exercise to make yourself lose those extra 5 pounds or to be extreme. Ours is, if you feel great in the clothing, but you're sitting on the couch, that's totally great, as long as you're doing what feels great to you. So we love having people, whether they're teachers, chefs, thought provokers, just leaders in the space, anybody who's passionate, we want to hear from them and partner.
Work with athletes and create content that maybe engages people who are not elite athletes but are North Face fans.
Yeah, totally. So our influencers in chief at the North Face are athletes, right? The brand being as old as it is and being envisioned back in the 60s in San Francisco around, providing reliable products to enable exploration. The evolution has really led us to this place where, we do have the world's most elite mountain athletes really being the sharp point of our brand. And so we continue to lead with our athletes. We always say internally we're an athlete-led brand. So there's a lot of ways that our athletes create content. They do it individually, they do it as teams, they do it small budget, they do it big budget. If you guys have heard of the film Free Solo, 2 of our athletes, Alex Honnold and Jimmy Chin, were responsible for that film. So there's a whole breadth of athlete content. I think over the years, the brand sort of organically morphed and became something much bigger than just a outdoor brand. It became culturally relevant with street culture, urban culture, art, and music, and sort of in a natural trajectory became more relevant in other spheres. So we also see a fair amount of content coming through other, you could call them influencers or other communities within the brand that are sort of infusing additional and diverse energy into kind of the core of who we are. It's a big brand at this point, and we always will have our North Star of mountain sports and really pushing the bounds of what's possible as human beings as far as exploration. But it's also become more naturally democratized over the years.
That's super interesting. Jedd, your turn.
Yeah, I mean, as a smaller brand, we tend to lean on a lot of people that we know or are just super fans of the brand. And I think that's one of the things that we've done since day one that has been super successful for us too. So we'll tend to work with athletes that are less well known, that are not necessarily doing it for money. They're just kind of incredible athletes that we know from either, just being around town or have been connected through to the brand that we work with on a really close level, but they don't have the, necessarily the exposure that someone like Alex Honnold would have. But I think we've also really tried to work within this kind of broad set of people that are really interested in Topo. So that could be whether like my business partner, Mark, he goes to tons of live music all the time and has a lot of connection with bands. So as odd as it may sound, we tend to hook up bands a lot with product and get them to come into the store, and they'll be wearing Topo stuff when they play in Denver. And so it's everything from that to working with our friends who are climbers and backcountry skiers and are, legitimate athletes that don't really get paid to do it. They're just doing it for the love of the sport. So it's a really wide variety of people. And I think that because when we were starting Topo, the influencer model and social was really starting at that time, we've been able to see the arc of it. And I think for us, it's still kind of best at this point, because we don't have huge budgets, just to hook up with people that are really into the brand and are going to be, just talking about it because they love it and it feels really genuine that way.
For sure. And this is a question for all of you. Anyone can jump in, but you've all just spoken about kind of a big range of people that you might partner with. And one of the great things about sort of the influencer world is you can experiment and see where a relationship goes. I'm curious if you all can explain from your brand's perspective, how do you know when a relationship is really working? What does that look like? How do you, when someone feels very on brand for you, what does that look like and feel like? And how do you see that and know to invest further in a relationship? And what might that look like for you?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, for us, it's largely about shared values. And then, when we look at our best partners, they're really good storytellers, and they tell authentic stories, real stories that just naturally resonate. And so, we kind of are in this good position of having the pick of the litter because we are a bigger brand. So we do have a fair amount of resources to be able to partner with the most elite athletes, but pure elite athletic ability doesn't qualify you to be an athlete on our team. It's got to be really around shared values, and it all starts there. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I would say that's exactly what I was going to say. I think if there's a kind of just a willingness to work together too, I think that's a big one. If it feels forced, then it just doesn't work well for, on the back end for each party, as well as you can kind of tell on the forward facing side that it's a little tough. So I think it's a personal connection as well as just a set of I think shared values and interests between the brand and the individual that just make it a lot easier. And I think at the end of the day, it definitely feels more genuine and natural when that person is talking about it, because they are inherently connected with the brand.
I agree with everything you guys have said. Totally spot on. For us, we've done a lot of partnerships that have been about creating clothing with, a partner, and the more authentic their passion for Beyond Yoga is, and as more that we're aligned in our mission, the better the product turns out. I've seen a lot of times where people, say they're fans, but don't really understand, what makes us special. And they'll push really hard to have something in a product that doesn't make sense and doesn't lend itself to the Beyond Yoga community. And those partnerships never, end up coming to fruition, because we're not going to put out product that we don't believe is going to be the best for our people. And, conversely, when we have done collaborations that have, one that comes to mind is we did something with Amanda Klutz last year, and she was so passionate and excited about the jump roping jumpsuit that we made for her, that she talked about it all of the time, and it became, she wore it everywhere. She's still wearing it, and it became really, popular because she loved it so much, and everybody, could really feel that. And she also picked fabrics to work with that are our best fabrics. So it was a really genuine partnership.
That's great. And When you find someone that you're really interested in working with, or you have those shared values, for example, Jamie, you mentioned your athletes, but they need help with sort of the storytelling side, because I can imagine not everyone who's like a globally renowned climber is necessarily great on Instagram, right? That's a hard skill. How do you help the people that you work with that you've identified as being really compelling, but maybe, there's always ways that they can perhaps better reflect the brand values, or as you were saying, Michelle, understand a bit better what it is that makes your product stand out on the market? How do you give them the tools to be your best partner when you've already gotten going with someone?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak to that. Of course, not every athlete comes in an expert storyteller, so there's always the opportunity to partner with them and coach them up in essence. And we're fortunate to have just a really talented team of people in marketing here internally, on the brand team, on the creative team. And then as an athlete community, we have a really strong resonance as well. Just before I got on this panel, I was on a planning call for our weekly town hall meeting. We've been doing weekly town hall meetings with our entire athlete team via Zoom. So I was just on with our team captain, Hillary Nelson, and Conrad Anker. And we actually have a guru as well, this guy, Tim Tate, and he kind of helps shape the culture within our athlete team. So I think a lot of it happens on a peer-to-peer basis. And then we also just have really sharp minds on our internal teams at the North Face, people who have agency experience, have worked for other small core and massive consumer brands. And so there's just this massive melting pot kind of thing going on. And it tends to work really well. And there's just these sort of natural mentorship relationships that develop within the athlete team. And some of the older, more experienced folks have wisdom to add, and some of the younger, more digitally savvy athletes share some of their knowledge about the media landscape, having evolved with some of the older athletes. So there's just this massive like sharing mentality.
That's great. Jedd, how about you?
Yeah, I would say there's kind of, two routes you can take with a lot of people. Some are great at doing it top to bottom, like Jamie was saying, that are have grown up in this whole world and really get it. And I think there are some that are definitely more focused on the thing they're doing rather than the delivery of that thing. So I think you kind of have to have two minds of that, where you can take their content and craft it into something that is really great for your audience. And that may be a little bit of you doing some work on the back end, sort of as the, documentarian of that process. And then there are some where you really lean on them to actually do the content creation themselves and talk about it. But I think for the most part, as a brand, if you have someone that, that you feel like is valuable to work with, they're going to provide that value and can usually speak to it very well. I always think about my dad was a scientist, and when I was growing up, he'd have like all of his scientist friends over, and a lot of them were fairly socially awkward in public, but then when they got together and started talking about stuff that they really knew about, they were just incredibly able to talk about it very eloquently, and it was just this amazing transformation. And I think that's what happens very often with people who are very good at a specific thing, is once you can just get them into that mindset where they're talking about the thing they're amazing at, they really can do it well. So I think that's what we try to do very often, is just let them relax, remind them that they're the expert there, and let them just kind of give all the goodness to people in the outside world, and not stress them out too much about making it perfect.
Great. Yeah, Michelle, can you talk a bit more about how you make those product collaborations the most successful they can be, for example?
Yeah, at the beginning of any of our partnerships or collaborations, we definitely we'll supply the partner with, a deck letting them know what like our brand vision and the, product and design direction for a particular season. One of the larger partnerships that we did was a partnership with Kate Spade, and that one actually like spanned for, I think, 2 years. But that was, really collaborative, and, they're obviously a much larger company than us, and they have a very specific, brand DNA. And we had to work together to merge that and to bring that like, very, very feminine, fun vibe of Kate Spade together with our, athletic athleisure, but make it, inclusive to everybody, and have it, have those, particular things. So we had to teach them about the athletic wear, because that wasn't an area that they were used to. And, we had to learn about some of their, fun and flirt. And I remember one of the things they wanted to do was create this jacket and it was an athletic jacket that had a bow that was like this big. And the whole jacket was striped. And I was like, nobody's going to buy this. This is crazy. I was like, this is going to be a production nightmare, but if this makes the partner happy, I'm going to do it. And it was hotcakes. People loved that thing. And it was the most complicated thing to sew. And I remember it was supposed to launch, like it was a January 1st launch. And I spent the entire like Christmas break at the factory with my team sewing those bows. But sometimes you have to give to make sure that the story that your partner is looking to portray is getting out there. And if it's some massive bows, sometimes it can be successful even when you don't realize it. So definitely supporting them, and having some flexibility on your side too, I think is important.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so much about building a community is sort of a balance between working with, the Kate Spades of the world or the Alex Honnold, sort of the bigger names, that the influencers that maybe the brands or names that have the biggest following, and then making sure that you also have, kind of the regular customer feels like they're an active part of your community, right? So I'm curious how you all balance your time and resources in order to keep all of those things going at once. Like, how do you know that you're balancing your investments in your community, so that you're not overloading too much on big names or on sort of your regular customer, because it's all a lot of work to keep these relationships going, right?
Absolutely. I mean, for us, that Kate Spade collaboration was a lot larger of an endeavor than I think that any of us realized we were getting into. And we ultimately were creating, product lines for them for, I think it was 8 seasons in a row. And it took up every person in the company's, time and resources. And ultimately it was a great experience and brought Beyond Yoga new, brand recognition and new customers. But I think that the partnerships that have, that we've chosen to spend our time on more recently have been, smaller collaborations, smaller partnerships. Like one thing that I thought that our marketing team did that I absolutely loved was for Valentine's Day or Galentine's Day, we did, just some stories with some members of our community, and we brought in, different women who, like groups of best friends who are, true Beyond Yoga fans, and just listening to them, their stories, watching how they interact, learning how they love the product and how it makes their lives better, but listening to them talk, it was so inspiring. And those women, we continue to partner with them on different things. Some of the women that we interviewed were members of our team, some of them were members of our community, but we're, constantly like in communication with them because that's what's natural and what makes sense. But from resources, it's authentic and it works, and it doesn't touch all of the different areas of the company. And I think it came together in a very positive way with minimal amount of effort from the company at large. And so I think that those partnerships are really important. I think we've also done partnerships where, we've turned over like our Instagram to a partner, or, recently we've been doing things where we're on our Instagram, we're showing our internal team, like how they're working from home. And I think that seeing real people behind the scenes is really engaging to our community. They want to know that we're struggling with trying to get our kids, to eat their lunch and do their Zoom classes while we're trying to get our work done. And we're not all perfect. And I think, shining a light on the reality of things is, and just keeping it real and authentic just helps people relate more and, not feel as alone. And I think in this time, a lot of people feel alone. And so knowing that other people are struggling and seeing it, but seeing the fun with it, I think can be really helpful and a good use of the company's time.
Sure. Anyone have anything to add before we move on?
Yeah, I'd just like to offer, I think there's an important lesson in not being, like every brand should have their sharp point or their true north, and they should hold those things as sacred. But I think there's a risk of being too precious in that process. And I think there's just a massive potential for brands to open up their ears and hear what's happening sort of with the groundswell. I think in the case of the North Face, there are just a wide breadth of different communities who have resonated with the brand. And so, our athletes specifically have their own individual media and communities. So they're always interacting back and forth. And we at the brand are also trying to have our ears open, not just to mountain sports enthusiasts, but to cultural enthusiasts as well. And I think the greater ability you have to keep your ears open and develop that two-way discourse with your audience, the more opportunity you have to breathe energy into the brand and keep things on the up and up.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like you're talking about, it has to be a two-way street, especially anymore, because, just the fact that people are able to communicate so effectively with brands, and brands are able to communicate so effectively with people. You have to listen, and you have to kind of acknowledge that your audience is this living, breathing thing out there that can not only, help you improve your brand if you do get a job listening to them, but I think also just really, keep you oriented in the right direction. So I think it is really important that you're not just pushing stuff out, that you're also taking some in constantly and just listening.
Yeah, speaking of that, before we went live, we were talking about how, there's so much brand engagement happening right now with a lot of people, a lot of your customers stuck at home. Obviously, the pandemic has all of these different business implications for fashion and retail. And I'm curious, from a content perspective, what are some of the challenges you're facing now to keep sort of your channels vibrant and exciting? I've spoken to some brands who are just pulling some stuff out of the archives and sharing it again. I'm sure the North Face has some really cool images from decades past, but what are the challenges of creating content right now, and how are you all handling it?
Yeah, it's been complicated to say the least. I think tongue in cheek before the panel started, my fellow panelists and I were discussing when can we talk about selling things again? And tongue in cheek, but we wanted to really show up in a way where we were helpful to the community. And so we had this mentality of first response, first and foremost. So where could we apply resources that could help people on the front lines of the COVID response? So leveraging our supply chain to create protective equipment, working with partners in that endeavor, infusing additional dollars into our Explore Fund, which is a fund that's already been established, which in this case is really going to help provide support to the communities and individuals that enable exploration. So those efforts are really tailored to the brand, but in a way that provides direct community support to nonprofits in some of these gateway communities that serve up recreational opportunities to a wide number of people. We've also worked extensively with our athletes to resurface old content that's still really relevant and compelling, new content that's just lighthearted and entertaining. Some of our European athletes have been creating like bouldering problems in their houses in France, and they've been climbing all around like monkeys in their own homes, which has been pretty funny. So just making sure that there's some levity too, but making sure that we're also showing up in a really supportive and tone correct way during this difficult time, because we really feel like, you know, a lot of that culture just starts internally. We're lucky we've kept everyone employed. We've closed our retail stores and kept those people employed as well. And just really trying to be good stewards during this time, and use this honestly as an opportunity moving forward to reinforce our community orientation and leadership.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, a lot of that has been similar for us too. We've been able to, we do a lot of our bags here in Colorado, and a lot of those sew shops, unfortunately were closed during this, and we were able to get a few of those back up and going again by making masks for the state, and kind of supporting people who are not necessarily, you know, in hospitals working in direct line of sight with this thing, but on whether it's you know, homeless populations, or even just working at a front desk at you know, government organization that's open right now. We've been able to provide masks for those people, so that's been great. I think from a community standpoint, it's actually been really awesome just to be able to engage with a lot of our fans and a lot of our community members that in a much different way than we have in the past, on a much more personal level, and just kind of talking to them about what's going on day to day with them, and what they're struggling with, what we're struggling with, and providing content that's more just like a, you know, a personal recommendation rather than this brand push that we're doing right now that, you know, can hopefully help people pass the time and learn about stuff that they may not, you know, have known about in the past. So I think, you know, if there's any positive that's come out of it, it's been not just really interacting with our community on a much different level, which has been great.
Yeah, I think this idea of enablement content is really powerful. Like, how can you provide content to your audience that like teaches them something that adds value? And that's always been the case, but I think right now we have this micro opportunity to really lean into that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, with our community, we're finding that, you know, well, first I want to say, like, our team is working so hard, and the idea that, you know, we were able to shift and pivot to this work from home has been, you know, incredible experience, and I'm so proud of everybody for being able to shift so quickly and to be able to pivot. But specifically for marketing and for social, you know, it really drives home. Like, I'm trying to get the team to make sure that they're not burning out, and to practice self-care, and to make sure that, you know, these hours are not turning into, you know, round the clock, because you can feel like your work is an escape from some of, you know, the news cycles, and you could just throw yourself in. And although at points that's healthy, you know, it isn't the right way to operate. You know, it has to be a work-life balance. And it with the internet, you know, being 24/7, and people are craving content more than ever right now, you know, it is a struggle for the marketing team to keep up with all of the demand. And, you know, when I think about it, I think about the individuals behind it. And, you know, like I said, the whole team is jumping in to try to help and create additional content to, you know, to try to take some of the pressure off of the social team, because we are a very small and scrappy team. And I am constantly impressed with how they are, you know, pivoting. And right now, our wholesale team, you know, they aren't, obviously they're not in strong sales mode right now, but we are, you know, continuing to keep those members of the team, you know, with us, and they have all been really willing to help out, jump into customer service, jump into, direct messages with customers to help, the social team make sure that they're staying on top of the constant barrage, of conversation and questions. And we also did, pivot to try to help our community. So we started making masks as well. I had no idea when we came up with this idea. I thought, we're going to just donate a lot of masks. Like, I just want to keep our contractors, because we're domestically, manufactured. So I wanted to keep our LA-based team employed as much as we could. And so I was like, let's just make things, masks for the front lines, and we'll just donate. And then, a couple people in our community reached out, and they were like, how can we help? Like, we feel helpless at home. And so then I was like, oh, maybe we'll, let them, like, maybe we'll do it so they can buy masks as well. And then I was like, all right, what if we do like a 2 for 2? So if they buy something for them, then they're giving, and so they can, participate. And that's turned out to be just like a tremendous, thing for our company. But on the flip side, we're working with skeleton crews at the manufacturing facilities, and also at our fulfillment facility. And people on our social, unfortunately, did get a little angry at how long some of the delays were going on. And so that was an interesting learning, because we were having a very positive moment, and then it shifted very quickly to frustration and anger. And I want to protect my team from that as well, because they take it very personally, and they all want to do like such a good job for our community. And so I think that was really interesting, and to help explain a little bit more about what we're going through, because I think there's always like a vision that brands are just these big corporate entities that are just going, and then to show some of the faces behind, and to show the people who are actually sewing those masks, and how like we need to make sure they're keeping themselves safe while, and make sure they have the proper equipment. They're, spaced apart. You can't have as many people working on the same things, and to try to educate everybody about, the challenges happening in different areas. And when we were able to communicate that, the outpour was so supportive and so encouraging, and like brought it right back up. So, I think that just, again, that authentic communication, being transparent, and like really letting people know what you guys are going through on the other end helps people have more compassion. And we've just seen a total turnaround.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and something I've seen also with sort of the more fashion brands. The consumer doesn't know how complicated wholesale relationships are, and how you can get, stuck with an order that was canceled, all these things that obviously they shouldn't need to worry about, but do have implications for your business, especially during this crisis. So I think it's been really interesting to see brands find a way to explain that in a way that isn't overwhelming, but helps the consumer understand the business, and I think makes them feel more connected if it's done correctly, right? I'm curious, just to stick on, our focus point of influencers and partners, how do you help them navigate these tricky tones of this time too? Because what's so challenging from a marketing perspective about this time period is that some of your consumers are bored, some of them are frustrated, some of them are wanting to shop, some of them are really sad, some of them are worried about their future. Like, everyone's feeling everything at a different time, and it's hard. I think it's really challenging to adapt your marketing tone to satisfy all those things at once. How do you help your partners navigate that too, and not have or at least learn from some of the things that you're seeing with your audience, or just make sure that they're not, misrepresenting your brand now that perhaps the stakes are higher when mistakes happen?
Yeah, I think it's definitely like we were talking about before is they need to kind of speak from where they're coming from and what's happening with them on a daily basis. And I think people are going to ultimately respond better to that than if people feel like they're trying to do something just to sell the brand, or they're somehow being disingenuous with whatever they're talking about. I think if they can just the same thing we're trying to do right now is reach people on their level and talk to them about what they're doing to get through it, provide some tips, like things that are working for them right now. And I think, if it's within the context of what you're talking about with the brand, whether it's climbing all over the kitchen or doing your own like home baking or whatever it is, I think that really helps people, because if they're coming to the brand for a specific reason, they still probably need to stay within those rails of what the brand is about. But I think that influencers, and I think that the people that are helping create content for brands right now can speak from a personal level, but just speak to the stuff that is most relatable to that brand at a specific point.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think a lot of the challenge we confronted internally, right, when COVID crisis unfolded, it's like for weeks we were deliberating about how we show up in this moment. And when I spoke before about the tongue-in-cheek comments around when can we sell again, we weren't having those discussions, but we were trying to figure out creative ways to use that sales lever to help people. So we ultimately came up with a program to essentially extend the pro deal that we would offer, like a mountain guide or a grassroots ambassador. We extended that pro deal or discount 50% off to first responders and healthcare workers. And so that was a way that we could actually excite some of the people who are on the front lines. And we weren't sure how that was going to go over, actually. And then we kind of tested it in a small way. And we actually had great feedback from some internal team members, family members who are nurses and are doctors. And they said, when this thing was rolled out, it just was the talk of the entire hospital, because everyone was so excited to get outdoors and go camping with their families after this whole thing passed over. So it gave them something to look forward to. So that was a good example of sort of how internally we decided to show up, and we were actually able to use something promotive in nature to do it. I think on the athlete side of things, the athletes were all rightfully, grappling with this for themselves. These are people who have made careers, they're professional mountain sports athletes, and without being able to go and pursue their crafts, they were sort of left without answers. So we've really used our weekly town hall meetings with our athletes to develop a bit of a sounding board so that athletes can share sentiments about how they're feeling about what they're saying on their social, the content they're putting out. And ultimately, like, our position is we want them to be real about it. And some of them have been really great about showing up on their social and just admitting to their audience they don't have the answers and this is really fucking difficult, and just being real about it. And I think there's been a lot of great resonance with the community just based on how real the athletes have been about this as well.
That's super interesting. We just have 2 minutes left. It would be great to end super quickly. I'd love to hear from you all. How do you think your brand's relationships with influencers will change as a result of this crisis? Or if we come into this sort of extended new normal, are there elements of these relationships that you think will change? We have 1 minute left, so we have to go fast.
I think it'll just get more personal, and people will actually speak like really genuinely about what they're doing. And I think that's going to be a really positive thing that's going to come out of it, that I think everybody hoped for, at the beginning when they started working with influencers. So I think it'll be great. Yeah,
I would agree. I mentioned before, like, the risk of being too precious with the sharp point of your brand. And I think through this, we'll hopefully continue to humanize what we're doing and stay, sharply focused on our true north, but also continue to widen the aperture of our resonance with other communities.
I completely agree. I think it's just going to get, continue to be more real and more authentic. And I think that the more that we can hear from people and see how they are, weathering the storms and their good days and their bad days, I think that everyone we want to see it all. We want to laugh. We want to cry. Like, we want to go through the range of emotions with everybody. And I think that just makes our connections deeper and more authentic.
Well, great. We've come to the end. Thank you, everyone, for your insight and all your stories. I really appreciate it. And thanks for everyone who joined to watch.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.